Hi there, and thanks for being back again. This week was quite packed because there was a birthday, a funeral, a concert, and I was walking twice as much as last week. So how does that all impact my weekly weight? Was I losing or was I gaining? Stay with me to find out, and as always, thanks for watching. Again, as a quick reminder, I'm doing the Weight Watchers program, and in Weight Watchers each food has points assigned to it. I have 44 points per day, additional 28 points per week that I can use if I like, but I try not to touch them. I should always aim to use up all daily points, but can save up to 4 points, which will then be taken into my weekly allowance. And I can also earn points for physical activities. For instance, every 1,500 steps earns me a point. But now let's get started. Sunday I started traditional again with 3 eggs, 0 points, and then 2 bread rolls, 9 points, with a little bit of low-fat butter on it, 3 points, and most of the cold cuts come also at 0 points, except for the corned beef and the Leona, which together also comes in at 3 points. So this breakfast comes in at 15 points. I wanted to start off the week quite nicely with a walk, because last week I couldn't walk that much because of the weather, and today you can see it's quite sunny. So I was seizing the opportunity to just head out. And I have to tell you one thing. I've stopped smoking like 6 or 7 years ago, and today when I was walking into the graveyard, someone was smoking directly in front of me. And I was smelling that, and it was completely disgusting. That is something that is not new to me, but this directly in front of me was like 10 or 15 meters. And I'm so sensitized now that I still can smell it and it still bothers me. Which I guess in the long run is a good sign, because my sense of smell is getting better and better, because when you smoke you lose it a little bit. And it tells me that I will likely never start smoking again. Which is nice to see that I wouldn't even consider starting smoking again for whatever reason. Also, another quick call out. As you might have seen in last week's video, I've lost 1 kilogram, and that was even though I was not walking that much, and I attributed a lot to the fact that at the last day in the evening I was having some very protein heavy chicken wings and no carbs at all after my breakfast. So I guess I will try to do that more, because carbs in the evening is never a good thing, and I will see how that will work out. Of course, that will be tough with nachos, because you don't eat nachos for breakfast, you usually have them in the evening, but I try to cut short on that as well, even though I've bought a lot of them in bulk a few weeks ago. For lunch then, I made myself my salad again, where all the ingredients basically have 0 points. It just costs me 10 points for 2 tablespoons of oil that goes into the sauce, and another 2 points for the herb mix I put in there. But since I also wanted to have some proteins, I also grilled myself 4-minute steaks, which are very lean and tender cuts of pork meat that you just have to fry for literally a minute on each side, hence the name. I had that with a little bit of steak sauce, so 8 points for the steaks and 3 points for the sauce. So my whole lunch came up to 21 points and filled me up so much that in the evening I wasn't even hungry and was just using up my remaining points by having some onion rings, Asian style, which are pretty much similar to Funyuns, I guess. But I'm not sure, because I never had those, and the onion rings we have as snacks in Germany are quite different. So I can't say for sure. 9 points for this bag. Overall it was 45 points, and with 5 points I earned from walking, I could even save 4 points and put on top of my weekly allowance. On Monday, to mix it up at least a little bit, I had some different bread rolls, this time Swiss style, that are a little bit darker than the ones I usually use and have a very different taste. They are called Schweizer Weckli, and I again had them with a very thin layer of low-fat butter and then some point-conscious cold cuts, which all comes up to 14 points. But then when I headed out, I noticed that it had snowed for the first time this year. Well, let's say the first time it didn't melt it the moment it hit the ground. That was a nice sight to see, so I'd like to share some impressions with you. After my walk I fried myself up the remaining minute steaks I had, because they came in a pack of 8. I had them again with some steak sauce, so overall 11 points again. And in the evening I used up the remains of my ingredients for my salad and did another one, 10 points. However, I still had 9 points to use up, so I decided to have some bread in the evening as well, and I bought the flavor I really love, which is onion bread. I had that with a thin layer of low-fat butter again and some cold cuts, which exactly came up to the 9 points I wanted to use. And with the 4 points I earned from walking, I could put another 4 points into my weekly savings. On Tuesday I had 3 eggs again, and then the 2 remaining Swiss bread rolls. Again with point-conscious cold cuts, so this was just 12 points. For lunch I fried up myself 2 nice pieces of Kassler, which is seasoned meat and quite delicious. The meat itself came at 16 points, then I had some potatoes with it, 6 points. I also made myself some nice sauerkraut, which came at 0 points. And of course I needed to have sauce to go with that, 3 points for that. So that whole dish was 25 points. But then in the evening I was playing on the PlayStation again for the first time in like 5 years or so. As I'm currently watching and reviewing the show The Last of Us, I thought let's just revisit the game and try to make it through this time. Because a few years back I started and didn't made it that far. However, after like 2 hours of playing, I was getting a little bit nauseous. I guess it was some kind of motion sickness, because I just wasn't used anymore to playing a computer game. Especially one where everything is moving in every which direction. So to calm my stomach, my supper was some pretzel sticks, which is like a secret recipe if you have stomach issues, and a large glass of Coke Zero, which is also said to help with stomach issues. This all was exceeding my daily allowance and I was using 51 points. But as I saved a lot of points in the previous days, I used up all those points but 1, which means I still haven't touched my weekly allowance. And then it was Wednesday and I skipped my usual breakfast in lieu for just a mandarin and a banana, 0 points. And that way I could afford to have a little bit of a more heavy lunch, which is tortellini with ham in a nice creamy sauce, and has whopping 23 points. I mean, it really is tasty, but 23 points? Oh dear. But then in the evening I was off to a concert. The first one I went to since the pandemic hit, which was for one of my favorite bands, the Canadian band Metric. And the fact that is quite funny is that the last concert I went to before the pandemic hit was also them on their last tour. When they came on the stage and started to play, I can tell you that my heart was... They played for roughly 1.5 hours and it was a fantastic concert again. Even though I guess I'm getting old because I think concerts in general are just way too loud. Fortunately I had some protective gear with me, but it was so loud that in places I wasn't even sure if I recognized the song correctly. And the volume seemed to be increasing over the runtime of a concert. But hey, I wouldn't let my evening get spoiled by that. The concert was just too entertaining and I just enjoyed their music way too much. Their lead singer Emily Haynes was rocking the stage as vivid as usual, and in the end, something you don't see with each band, they all took a bow before they left the stage. As this concert took place in a club where, back in the day, when I was still dancing the night away with friends in the weekends, the Metropole, I decided to follow an old tradition that we had back in that day, and that was having a doner kebab right after we went out and were completely spent. I think it's not the same vendor anymore, but I still went for a kebab. However, I went for a dürüm, which has less points than a regular doner kebab. 19 points for that. And when I was back home, unfortunately, I couldn't resist to just watch a little bit of TV and had some nacho chips along with that. Because I had bought a new flavor, Mexican barbecue, that I really was curious about. So I had half of a bag at 8 points, which unfortunately exceeded my daily allowance again. The whole day added up to 50 points, which means I was 6 points over. However, I earned 3 points from walking and had an additional point saved up, but it means I still had to dig into my weekly allowance and take 2 points from there. Thursday was a tough one, because as you might remember from a previous video, my aunt recently died, and on that day we had the funeral. That day also was the birthday of my sister though, which means this day was filled with a very sad occasion and a very joyous one, back to back. As I of course didn't want to be late to the funeral, I skipped breakfast and even forgot to take a banana with me, which I originally planned to do. After the funeral, we were meeting up for a little gathering. But since I was also meeting my sister and my mother later to eat at an Indian restaurant, I only ordered a soup there. But as everyone was waiting for their food almost 3 hours because apparently the cook was sick and nobody told us about it, and at that point they told us we would still have to wait another half hour, basically everyone was leaving and cancelling their order. The time, however, was not wasted because I really enjoyed talking to my relatives that I have not seen in quite a while. But because of not getting anything, I ended up being completely famished. So when I met up with my sister, we couldn't wait and didn't want to wait for my mother, who was again 1.5 hours late. Yes, 1.5 hours. So we went for some nice starters. Unfortunately again, I forgot to film those starters and also the main course. But to give you an idea what I had and how I estimated it points-wise, here are some photos. As starters we shared some fried vegetables that I calculated at 7 points, and I also had a banana milk with it, which I estimated at 4 points. For the main course I had chicken vindaloo, which I estimated at 9 points, plus a solid helping of rice, again 9 points, and I also had Indian deep fried bread, bhatura, which comes at 7 points per piece. That all I think shouldn't have been that bad, but at the end I was also thinking that I should have enough points, so I went also for a cocktail, a pina colada, which came at surprising 17 points. I still felt that likely this will not exceed my daily allowance because I hadn't eaten anything yet at that point, but once at home I calculated it and came up at 53 points. So at that point I thought, okay, this week I will have to use my weekly points as well. So I might just lean into it and see how that will impact the outcome at the end of a week. So I also had the second half of the tortilla chips from last night, which came at 8 points, which added up the whole day at 61 points. With the 3 points I earned from walking that day, it still meant that now I have used up 16 points of my weekly allowance and only have 12 left there. On Friday, because the previous day was quite consuming, I didn't walk at all and I started my day to mix things up a little bit with some bread instead of bread rolls, because I still had the onion bread lying around. So 15 points for this. Since I'm aware of the fact that I have eaten quite a lot the day before, I went for a Pichelsteiner Topf for lunch, which comes in at just 4 points, as you might know by now. As snacks in between, I had a little bit of fruit here and there. That, of course, comes in at 0 points. In the evening, because last week that was working quite well, I was concentrating on having something that is high in protein and went for some crunchy chicken wings. 27 points for those. This all adds up to 46 points, so my weekly allowance was shrinking again by 2 points to 10. On Saturday, just to check, I was stepping on the scales, and if that would have been my weighing day, I can tell you I would have solidly gained weight. So instead of a traditional breakfast and to save some points, and also because I woke up quite late in the day, I had a can of Texas Pot as my breakfast, which comes in at just 9 points. I then headed out for an extended walk because I felt like walking is something I need to do today if I did not want to gain so much weight at the end of a week. And as you can see, the snow is all gone by now. It actually was just there for a day or two, so a big whoop-de-doo. For lunch then I also had just a Pichelsteiner Topf again, 4 points, because I wanted to save points today come what may. I even went out to have another walk, which I combined by checking by my sisters to make sure everything is fine with her cat, as she is currently visiting our nephew and niece. And after our duck pond was frozen over a few days ago, when it was snowing, where of course all the ducks had been gone into the south, now that it is just thawing up a little bit, they are back again, and that completely took me by surprise, seeing them on the still partially frozen pond. But that's nature for you. I ended the day with just having something that is high in protein again, which is some chicken wings, which came in at 16 points, which means that Saturday I just used up 29 points. And I tried to see what would happen if I just keep it that way and don't use them up. Because again, I don't want to gain that much weight at the end of a week again. So let's see if that works out when I step on the scales tomorrow. Of course, that is not the way you usually should approach things, but I wanted to try. Well, it's Sunday and it's weighing day, of course. I'm just on my way to a polling station because today is also an election that I want to participate in, of course. But just to let you know that, of course, this week wasn't different from the others. It is a little bit of a weird thing going on. So I was gaining a little bit of weight, 400 grams. though my muscle mass was going up again, but maybe that was because I was walking twice as much. Maybe it was because I was digging into my weekly allowance of points. I guess the main learning is that I really should try not to use those weekly points and just stay with the daily ones. But we will see. Right now I can just say I will power through, I will keep walking, I will try to walk even more than last week. I will also try to not touch the weekly points and see how that all works out, because at the end of the day that is all that I can even do. So thanks for sticking with me this week. I hope your week was nice. I hope the next week will be fantastic for all of us. And I hope we will see each other again next week. Until then, thanks for watching. See you soon and enjoy your time.